She didn't think you'd ever leave. She thought you'd always be there, waiting, checking, hoping. In her mind, you were the fallback, the safe bet, the man who would stay rooted even when she walked away. But the moment that undid everything wasn't loud. It wasn't a speech or a confrontation. It was still, quiet, intentional. It was the moment you stopped. You stopped chasing her attention. You stopped watching her world. You stopped needing her approval to feel whole. And that silence, the one she never saw coming, became the shift. Not just for her, but for you. Because something in you changed. Not with noise, not with anger, but with clarity. If you're listening to this, you're not here to be entertained. You're here because you've felt it too. The silence, the unraveling, the slow return to yourself. Maybe you're still in it. Maybe you're just starting to rise. Wherever you are, this message is for you. And if any part of what you're about to hear speaks to something inside you, support the message. Like the video. Subscribe to Stoic Station. Let this truth reach another man who needs to hear it. You're not broken. You're just waking up. Now, let's dive in. It never begins with a grand declaration. You don't stand in front of the mirror, clench your fists and say, "I'm done." No, the real turning point is far quieter. It begins when you wake up one morning and don't open your phone to check her story. You don't even realize it right away, but that simple silence is the first ripple in a much larger shift. Because you didn't just stop texting, you stopped orbiting. You stopped living in emotional proximity to someone who already chose distance. You didn't just remove her from your contact list. You began the process of removing her from your identity. You pulled your mind back into your own gravity. That space she once occupied, your attention, your overthinking, your morning routine of checking for breadcrumbs, starts to clear. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a decision you remake every day. But the momentum builds. You notice it when, instead of scrolling through old photos or rereading that final thread, you lace up your shoes and hit the pavement for a run. You sweat, you breathe, you hurt, yes, but it's a new kind of pain, a good one that tells you you're moving. And each drop of sweat becomes proof that you're already farther from the man who once begged the silence to speak. This is the shift that people don't see. You stop telling stories in your head about why she might still care. You stop performing internal negotiations about who was right and who was wrong. You stop checking timestamps. And maybe one day you even delete the entire thread, not to prove anything, but because you finally realize the story is over. You don't need closure when you've already closed the loop inside. That's the real turning point, not a confrontation, not a comeback. But when your mornings are no longer about her energy, they're about yours. The first real goodbye never happens in conversation. It happens silently, invisibly, in the mind. It begins when you realize that checking her profile, wondering what her posts mean, replaying your last words, none of that brings peace. It only deepens your dependency. You've been paying rent in a space she's not even showing up to anymore. Every story view, every reread, every midnight memory, you've been giving her real estate in your mind for free. And once you see it for what it is, the change begins. Because your attention isn't free, it's fuel, and you can either keep pouring that premium fuel into a stalled-out situation, or you can reroute it into an engine that takes you somewhere worth going. This is where emotional detachment stops being an idea and becomes a practice. You put boundaries on your screen time. You stop reaching for your phone out of habit. You don't need to see what she's doing. You need to see what you're becoming. Try this. Shut off notifications after 8 p.m. for 30 days. Call it your black screen challenge. Not to punish her, but to protect your growth. Instead of scrolling, journal. Every night, ask yourself, what did I build for myself today? Was it a stronger body, a calmer mind, a deeper conversation with a friend, a clearer sense of who you're becoming? Because the truth is, detachment doesn't start when she stops replying. It starts when you stop giving her the parts of you that were never meant to be negotiated, your peace, your focus, your purpose. You didn't walk away to win. You walked away to come back to yourself. And that's not the end of something. That's the beginning. The quiet yet powerful shift in perception doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in the background, quietly changing everything. At first, it's almost invisible. You're still showing up to work, still going to the gym, still texting your friends. But underneath the routine, something fundamental begins to shift. Your days are no longer shaped around her availability. They're shaped around your purpose. You used to delay plans just in case she replied. You used to keep your evenings open just in case she came back. But now, you train when you said you would. You take the trip you kept postponing. You go to that dinner, that event, that meeting, not for distraction, but because they reflect the man you're becoming. It's not about being selfish. It's about becoming centered. You're no longer driven by the hope of re-entry into her world. You're building your own world, and it has gravity. From the outside, no one would call it radical, but you feel the difference. Every choice you make now whispers, "This is my life. I decide how it moves." And that shift, steady, unapologetic, is where your power returns. You're not proving anything. You're just no longer abandoning yourself to stay emotionally available to someone who walked away. And the thing about energy is, it doesn't lie. Even if she's not watching, even if she's moved on, something in her feels it. She feels the change, even if she can't name it. It's not something she hears, it's something she senses. The warmth she once assumed would always be there, isn't. The safety net of your emotional presence, the comfort of knowing she could still tug on your energy anytime she wanted, is gone. She won't admit it. She may not even fully understand it. But the stillness you leave behind is louder than any message you ever sent. One night, she scrolls through your profile, maybe out of boredom, maybe out of curiosity, and for the first time, she doesn't feel certainty. She feels disconnection, disorientation. The caption that used to feel like it had a heartbeat now feels like a locked door. The photos still show your face, but not the man she knew, because he's not waiting anymore. He's not orbiting. She doesn't feel ignored. She feels replaced. Replaced by a man who is no longer seeking validation. Replaced by purpose, by presence, by peace. And no, this isn't revenge. It's not about hurting her. It's about healing you. Because energy doesn't disappear. When you stop investing in someone who stopped investing in you, that energy doesn't fade. It multiplies. It builds something stronger, something grounded. And when she finally notices that you're no longer where she left you, she won't know whether to call it regret or confusion or loss. But she'll feel it. Not bitter, not broken, just missing. And in that space stands a man she never expected, calm, focused, unshakable. Not because you needed her to see it, but because you finally saw it in yourself. And once she feels that absence, once she senses the thread she used to pull no longer leads to your heart, something else starts to unravel inside her. Confusion. Not because you were cruel, but because your stillness no longer fits the script she expected you to follow. That's when your silence becomes psychological power. It's not just an absence of noise, it's an interruption of pattern. You used to respond. You used to explain. You used to reach out, sometimes just to keep the peace. But now, nothing. Not cold, not passive-aggressive, just quiet. And the human brain hates unresolved patterns. We're wired for symmetry, for cause and effect. When she says nothing and you still say nothing, when she leaves the door open and you never walk through it, her mind doesn't rest. It recalculates, rewrites, reaches for answers that don't exist. That's the beauty of silence done right. It doesn't beg to be understood. It refuses to play the game. And that refusal, that's what drains her, because your calm now costs her emotional energy. There's a reason it feels so powerful. Your silence didn't come from retreat. It came from resolve. You didn't go quiet because you ran out of things to say. You went quiet because you realized you've already said enough. And when the urge rises to speak, to send one last message, to check one last update, you don't fight it with anger. You master it with clarity. Try the one-breath rule. One deep breath before any impulse. Most desperation dissolves before the exhale ends. Because most of the time, what we're fighting isn't silence. It's the discomfort of not being seen. But here's the truth. When you see yourself, you stop needing anyone else to. And that clarity leads to something even more difficult, even more honest. Your growth begins to make her face herself. Because you weren't supposed to evolve. You were supposed to wait. You were supposed to fall apart quietly, just enough to make her feel powerful, but not enough to truly let go. You were supposed to orbit forever, silently asking, "Are you watching?" But now, you're no longer orbiting. You're building. You're not checking if she texted. You're wondering how many chapters you'll finish before bed. You're not replaying the past. You're fully booked in the present. And the most confronting part, she didn't ask for a mirror, but your growth is one. Your calm reflects her chaos. Your discipline reflects her inconsistency. Your stillness becomes the backdrop to her noise. You didn't set out to challenge her. You simply moved forward. But sometimes that forward motion shakes the foundation of someone who thought they could leave you behind. So you keep going. You sign up for that course, that retreat, that class you once told yourself you didn't have time for. You expand your life so far beyond her that she can't find her place in it anymore. Not because you locked her out, but because you've outgrown the door. And now, without saying a word, you've said everything. And when your growth holds up that mirror, when your silence speaks louder than anything you ever said, something subtle yet undeniable starts to shift in her experience of you. What she once used effortlessly to trigger a reaction no longer works, and she knows it. That's when the invisible power is gone. There was a time when all it took was a simple, vague message, 3 words. You awake? And suddenly, you were back in the loop, back in her orbit, back to checking, wondering, hoping. It didn't require effort on her part, just a flicker of attention, and it pulled you in like a tide. But now, that text goes unanswered, or if you do see it, your pulse doesn't spike, your chest doesn't tighten, your mind doesn't race. That's not apathy, it's sovereignty. It's the realization that what used to trigger you now just passes through, like wind on your skin. Emotional triggers are like doorbells. She might still press them, but you've removed the wiring. She can try all she wants, but the house is quiet now, not because no one's home, but because the home no longer runs on borrowed electricity. And when that power is gone, when you've taken back the emotional access you once handed out so freely, it doesn't just change your relationship to her, it changes your relationship to yourself. You no longer fear her silence, because you no longer need her signal to feel grounded. You've detached without anger, and that's a kind of freedom most men never reach. And as you walk deeper into this new version of yourself, it becomes clear that transformation doesn't need applause. You stopped giving her access to the script, not out of spite, but because the story evolved and she's no longer a main character. You're writing scenes now that don't require her approval, her reactions, or her presence. You're building something real, and no one claps for the foundation. No one celebrates the quiet hours. But every silent rep, every meal you chose not to skip, every night you slept instead of spiraling, that's the real work. No one sees it. No one needs to. Because that validation you used to seek in her attention, you now find it in your own consistency. So you keep a silent wins log, not for pride but for clarity. A simple list of what you conquered today. Not the big things, but the ones that go unnoticed. The craving you ignored, the text you didn't send, the discipline you kept when no one was watching. That's how transformation happens. Quiet, daily, internal. And one day, without even meaning to, you'll look in the mirror and realize you became the man you once hoped she'd inspire you to be without her. Not to spite her, but because you finally realized she was never meant to be your source, only the spark. And now, you are the fire. And as your transformation continues, quiet, grounded, consistent, there's something happening on the other side of the silence that you'll never fully witness, but you'll sense it just the same. The same woman who once held all the emotional leverage is now left with only questions. Not the kind she asks aloud, but the kind that linger late at night, uninvited. That's the long-term impact on her mind. She scrolls, she wonders, she speculates, not because she regrets what happened, not yet, but because something about you no longer makes sense. You were once an open book, and now you're unreadable. And that shift unnerves her in ways she can't quite explain. It's no longer, does he still think about me? Now it's, why can't I read him anymore? And that question stings more than silence ever could. Because your distance doesn't come with drama. It doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like you evolved out of range. And that kind of disappearance is harder to shake than any argument ever was. But this isn't mystery for the sake of being mysterious. Mystery isn't a tactic. It's the natural result of authentic momentum. You're not withholding yourself to play mind games. You're simply no longer broadcasting your life for someone who stopped tuning in. Your profile isn't filled with cryptic quotes or subtle jabs. It's filled with progress, purpose, place, peace. That's the loudest message you'll ever send, and it requires no caption, just presence. And yet, even when you say nothing, she feels it. Not every woman will come back, but every woman feels it. Some will test the door again. A 1 a.m. Hey, stranger. A heart on a photo she hasn't seen in months. A story reply that says nothing but means everything. Others won't reach out at all, but they'll feel the vacuum, your absence in places where your energy used to live. They'll feel the space you left behind when you stopped orbiting their world and started building your own. And when those messages do come, subtle, calculated, seemingly harmless, you don't need to react. That's not your compass anymore. Her responses are not your roadmap. They're just data, information, not a reason to reroute. So when the ping lights up your screen and her name appears, draft your reply if you must, but don't send it. Just look at it, acknowledge the urge, and delete it. Not because you're angry, not because you're better, but because you've already answered the only question that matters. Are you still steering your own ship? The answer is yes. You're not waiting at the door. You're not hoping she walks through it. Because the man you've become no longer lives at that address. And as you continue steering your own ship, something even more profound takes root. Not just in how she sees you, but in how you've restructured your internal world. Because the truth is, she's no longer the center of your emotional universe. She doesn't just feel ignored, she feels replaced. But not by another woman. She's been replaced by purpose. The seat she once occupied with so much weight and expectation didn't stay vacant. It was claimed by your goals, your mission, your peace. That promotion you once delayed to keep your weekends open for her, you're chasing it now. The business idea you put off because the relationship consumed your focus, you're building it now. Purpose has a way of filling every room it enters, and when it moves in, it doesn't leave space for ghosts to linger. She may not understand it, but she feels it. The same way she used to feel your attention stretching toward her, she now feels that energy redirecting inward. Your focus, your ambition, your clarity, those are the new gravitational centers of your world. And she's not just watching you move forward, she's watching herself fall out of orbit. That's when it becomes clear. Real growth means her triggers no longer work. Her silence used to have volume. Her sudden emoji used to spiral your thoughts. A random like on an old photo once reopened wounds you thought had healed. But now, you've gone silent not out of avoidance, but out of mastery. It's like someone holding a remote-controlled car, pressing all the buttons, only to realize the batteries are dead. The wheels spin in the air, but nothing moves. That's what it feels like when she tries to tug on your old emotions and finds no reaction. This isn't numbness, it's awareness. It's not detachment for defense, it's detachment for dignity. And when those old emotional cues surface, you don't wrestle with them anymore. You simply name them for what they are. That's nostalgia, not instruction. That's memory, not momentum. The moment you give the feeling a name, it loses its grip. And in the absence of reaction, you begin to communicate something far stronger than any spoken word. Silence becomes the new language of a strong man. Not the kind of silence that punishes, not the kind that waits to be chased, but the kind that says, I respect myself enough to protect my peace. You no longer owe emotional access to someone who walked off stage. You're no longer performing, no longer explaining, no longer auditioning for a role in someone else's life. You disappear, not into bitterness, but into purpose. You take back your time, your energy, your presence. You choose when you're reachable and when you're not. You create distance not to punish, but to preserve what's sacred within you. And if the world wonders where you went, let them wonder. You're not missing. You're just no longer available to what once diminished you. Your silence is not a void. It's a statement. A declaration that you've learned how to be alone without being empty, how to be still without being lost. That kind of man doesn't need to raise his voice. His presence speaks for him. And when your silence becomes a language, when your peace becomes non-negotiable, something greater than distance begins to emerge. It's not just that you stopped reaching for her, it's that you no longer build your life in a way where she fits. Not out of bitterness, but because your evolution naturally writes her out of the story. You didn't rise to prove her wrong. You didn't grind in silence to get her attention back. You turned pain into purpose and became someone she never imagined losing. This kind of growth doesn't come with fireworks. It happens in the repetition, in the small decisions no one claps for, the early mornings, the unread messages, the meals cooked with intention, the nights you choose discipline over distraction. She doesn't see herself in your new world, and that's what unsettles her most. Not because she was erased, but because she was outgrown. You weren't competing with her expectations. You were replacing the version of yourself that once waited by the phone with a man who now waits for no one. Growth, at its core, isn't revenge. It's repurposed grief. That marathon you trained for, the one that broke you and remade you, she won't be at the finish line, but she'll see the medal. That side business that's now thriving, she wasn't there during the late nights, but she'll see the launch. Those friendships that deepened in your silence, she won't hear the conversations, but she'll feel the distance. You're not hiding. You're simply no longer living in a narrative where your value was tied to her recognition. You've become the story, not the subplot, not the fallback, the author. And as this chapter closes, there's one truth that settles deeper than all the rest. The deeper meaning of true silence is that you no longer need closure because you became the closure. You're not waiting for an apology. You're not hoping she finally understands. You've released the need for resolution because you are the resolution. The peace you used to beg for, you now protect it with boundaries. The love you wanted from her, you finally gave it to yourself. This is the final plot twist she never saw coming. The man who once needed her clarity no longer needs her presence. And that kind of calm can't be faked. It can't be manipulated. It can't be broken. So tonight, if any part of this message has echoed inside you, write a single sentence that begins, "From this day forward, I..." Finish it with a truth that doesn't need anyone's permission, a promise to yourself. Fold it, tuck it away. Not in a place of hiding, but in a place of honor, because from now on, that sentence is your new love letter. Not to her, to the man you're becoming, and the silence you walk in now. It doesn't represent what was lost. It speaks to everything you've found. Summary. So here's the final reflection. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a quiet realization that moving on was never about walking away from her. It was always about walking inward first, and then forward. You didn't leave to prove a point. You left to find your balance again. You didn't disappear out of spite. You disappeared into yourself, into the kind of peace that doesn't ask for attention, into the kind of strength that doesn't need to explain itself. And maybe one day she'll sense that shift. Maybe she'll feel it in a moment of stillness, curiosity, regret, admiration. Or maybe she won't feel anything at all. But that's not the part that matters anymore. Because the truth is, you didn't grow so she could notice. You grew because you were tired of feeling like someone else's option. You didn't move on to escape her. You moved on to return to the man you were before you started chasing answers outside of yourself. Now, your story isn't about who left, who stayed, or who finally understood. It's about the quiet power of choosing yourself. And in that choice, in that alignment, you found what you were always searching for. Not her, not closure, but you. And that more than anything is what makes you whole again. If this message stirred something deep inside you, if it reminded you that your silence holds power and your pain has purpose, then take a moment, right now, to support what we're building here. Like the video, share it, subscribe to Stoic Station. You never know who's out there, watching in silence, thinking they're alone. But when you share this, you become the spark. You help another man find clarity, strength, and the path back to himself. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. And you're not broken. You're just getting started.